Right.
Of course, you were redshirted your first year, and just for people out there who don't really know, or especially when you were playing, what all does that entail when you're redshirted? What can you do? What can you? I know the redshirt rules are different now, but when you were playing
Right.
back in 2007, what was that like?
Yeah. So it's a lot. It's a lot of work. I was always, to be 100% honest, I was always a little bit jealous of the guys who didn't have to redshirt. Um, so you do a lot of things. Maybe you do a lot of extra, basically. A lot of times you're going to end up on the scout team. And for me, that was being on the scout teams with guys like Quentin Groves, uh, Derek Marks was on the defensive line at that time too. Pat Sims was there too, and so it's tough. You're kind of um, I want to say a blocking dummy, but you're a body who's supposed to give, as a like in my situation as a redshirt offensive lineman, you're supposed to give them a look.
Mhm.
And you have specific drills where they're going to work on a rip or a swim or whatever it is that they're doing, and so you have to give them the most realistic look that you can, which you can imagine is not very glamorous. To have to go against Quentin Groves for 10 minutes solid while he practices his rip and swim on you. So there's a lot of that type of thing, and they're I know when I was there anyway, there were redshirt workouts, which oddly enough we did on Saturday morning. There was the strength coach at the time was Kevin Yoxel, who was a great man, and so we would have redshirt workouts on Saturday mornings before games. And so you'd be up at the complex 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. You'd have just this brutal workout, and then you'd be in the stadium the later that day. And so it was kind of surreal. You kind of look around and you think like this was the same day that from this morning where you were working your tail off, and now there's a game, and everybody kind of sees the fun side of things when you were doing the not so fun side of it this morning. So it's tough. I'll say in my case. Personally, I absolutely needed it. And most offensive linemen do. It's not the case for everybody, obviously. And each position is a little bit different. But it did me a lot of good. It allowed me to develop. The biggest thing for me too in that year was the game slows down a lot. Coming from high school to college, everything is moving 100 miles an hour, and so that year kind of allows you to get a little bit bigger picture view of everything. You start to understand things a little bit more, and it really helps slow down the game too. So it's tough, but it's honestly it's something that's needed for a lot of guys, including myself, in the long run.
Yeah, and that was an interesting year for Auburn. Like I said, 2007, the final year, start quarterback Brandon Cox, Al Borges. It was
Right.
his final year. I mean, he didn't even no, he didn't coach the bowl game. That was interesting. I remember that with Tony Franklin coming in, and then he was eight practices before the Peach Bowl against Clemson, which you guys won 23-20. Cody Burns with the touchdown in overtime to win that one. From what you remember, what was that like? Just going from Al Borges, of course, and then Tony Franklin coming in and changing the offense within in the bowl practice.
Right. It was I'm trying to think of of an apt word for it. It was a little bit of a culture shock. To go from Coach Borges is obviously a genius offensive mind, but his offense and Coach Franklin's offense were polar opposites, really.
Mm-hmm.
So to go from go from one end to the other there in the span of a few weeks, it was a little bit of a culture shock. It was a lot of a culture shock, to be honest. A little bit is an understatement, but yeah, it was a big culture shock, but it's something that it got better. Obviously, that following year in the offseason, we had a little bit more time. 8 days is a quick time. Yeah, that's a quick time frame to adjust to anything. So thankfully we had a little bit more time the next spring and summer to adjust a little bit. But yeah, anytime you have a coaching change, especially one as drastic as that was, in philosophies, it's you have to really hang in there mentally. You've got to be I'd say mentally tough, but you've really got to hang with it and know that okay, you can kind of can up everything that you knew and learn this new system And and it's like that with any coaching change. Ideally, maybe it's not so drastic, but yeah, like with any coaching change, it's it's an adjustment, but it's one of those things that you eventually get used to, and you move on from there, hopefully.
Yeah, and as offensive lineman, especially then, because now everybody's running the spread. So I mean, it's
Right.
rare to see somebody running what Al Borges was running then. That would be the oddity, or just the different kind of offense now.
Right.
But back then, just for that transition from running the West Coast, or a lot of people, or even I think even Al Borges called it the Gulf Coast offense, and then going to that spread as an offensive lineman. What was the biggest adjustment?
Really, the biggest adjustment, and you hit on it earlier. You hit the nail on the head. Kind of going from that downhill formation, run first mentality as an offensive lineman, to where you really hope to be just kind of a road grader, and mow guys over. I remember this is kind of the biggest adjustment that stuck out in my head. Under Coach Franklin's offense, we backpedaled and in pass protection. I mean, literally backpedaled. I remember the offensive lineman, and that's not necessarily passing a judgment on it, but it was a different technique for us. It was something that we weren't used to. Usually, especially coming from Coach Borges and Coach Neal's system there, we were used to going the other way and getting there in a hurry. So to literally go the opposite way more often than not was a big adjustment. And that's something that we kind of had to take on that mantle of, okay, we've got to hang with this is reality now. And so that was kind of the biggest one that stuck out in my head. And because really, as an offensive lineman, you're doing one of two. You're either run blocking or pass blocking ultimately. And obviously there are little variances here and there. But it took some work to get used to, like I said, literally going the opposite way of what you're used to.
I don't know. And in that season, Tony Franklin was fired after 6 games there. I know, then of course that was Tuberville's last year too as well. Just just that whole season, with the team. I mean, how were you guys, handling? What was it like just being one of the players on that team with all that going on with Tony Franklin, and at the end of the year, Tommy Tuberville, leaving the program?
Right. It's it's kind of what we were talking about earlier, where you really have to kind of rely on your player group and your leadership within the team in situations like that, because unfortunately, like we talked about a little bit earlier, that we'll say wasn't a very smooth transition. That whole situation got a little bit ugly by the time it was all said and done, and so really you kind of realize that that as in a situation like that, that as players, kind of like I mentioned earlier, you're the ones who are ultimately going to have to put the product on the field. Obviously that's going to come from your coaching staff, obviously, but you're the ones that the cameras are going to be on. And so you kind of have to look and take on a sense of pride in that situation and say, okay, look, we're the ones who are going to be either moving the ball or trying to stop the other team moving the ball. And you've kind of got to look inward in those situations, because you're obviously getting a lot of outside noise in those types of situations. In some ways, I think we did that, and in other ways, we probably could have handled that better, as a player group. But ultimately, we ended up getting through that, and thankfully brought in Coach Chiswick the next year, and that was kind of we talked about culture shocks. That was kind of a culture shock, to bring Coach Chiswick in there in a great way, and so the guys who hung with it through that through that tough year, ultimately were kind of it was paid off. It was rewarded there in the next couple of years. So we were thankful for that.
Just for you, just during that time, going from obviously redshirt freshman year in 07 and 08, and what happened there, then you go through the first season with Gene Chiswick, as you're kind of going through your college career. You're now going into 2000, into 2009, into 2010. Where were you at? What were you doing? Trying to make sure you were making yourself a better player, that you could become that starter, which you did become in the 2011 season.
Right. Yeah. And especially in that transitional time there, I mentioned Coach Yoxel earlier. Coach Yox did a great job. Really, anytime you have a change like that, it helps to have kind of a key figure or somebody to kind of maintain a sense of normalcy for you there. And for us, that was Coach Yox, the strength and conditioning coach, and he did a great job of really keeping everybody focused during all that, because it's hard to think about much else whenever you're running your brains out or squatting the house. You can't think about much else. And so Coach Yox did a great job that year of keeping everybody focused. And for me personally, I knew as an offensive lineman or defensive lineman, really for that matter, your strength is obviously going to be a big part of your game. And so thankfully for me, because of the way that Coach Yox handled that and everything, I was kind of able to pour all the extra energy into the weight room that year. And which for me, like I said, personally was an area that I needed to get better in. And so it paid off there over the next year or two. And so in the long run, it was, ended up being kind of a blessing in disguise for me personally, to be able to put that extra energy there into the strength and conditioning program. And it paid off there in the next couple of years when I was able to be a starter. And you're always thankful for that.
And then, of course, 2010 national championship season. Just what's that feeling like? To be a national champion. To see that at the time the Crystal Ball Trophy, to go through the season undefeated, and a lot of close games y'all guys had that year. Just
right.
Getting through that. A lot of stuff was going on. On the outside, the outside noises you hear coaches talk about nowadays. But just at the end of the day, 2010 national champions. Just how did that feel? And just even now when you reflect on it, 12 years later.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those things that it gets bigger with time. At the time you're kind of so caught up in it, and those games just go by over the course of a season, just go by so quickly. It seems like you blink and you're into the next game, and that's a good thing in a way, because it doesn't give you too much time to dote on the good or the bad, really. But it's one of those things that, like I said, it really gets bigger over time. To be able to look back at it and you realize just how unique that situation was. What was really cool about that team in 2010 is I've never been around a group of guys who where you had everybody pulling in the same direction. A lot of times within teams, even the best teams, you may have little, groups of players. This position group maybe thinks a little bit more of themselves than the other position group, or something like that. But in that 2010 team, it was really unique because everybody was pulling the same direction. There was never a sense of division there. There was there was never this, and something that really stuck out to me. There's never any blame in that team. If maybe the offense didn't play so well in games, which there were games where we didn't necessarily knock the top out of the scoreboard. In other games we did, but some games were tight. And it was really great that year. If the offense maybe wasn't playing so well, to be able to rely on the defense, and vice versa. I remember playing. We played a few tight ones that year. There were low scoring deals, and I remember I think it was the Arkansas game. Scored, between the two of us, scored 100 some odd points, 60, 63, 45, maybe somewhere in that ballpark. Mm-hmm. And, to be able to lean on each other and know that, I know people say it all the time, your teammate has your back, but that was really, honestly, to be transparent, honestly, probably the only time, in my playing career, where the time I felt that the most, I'll say. Where you really felt like your teammate, whether it was on your side of the ball or the other, had your back, and you could really rely on them. That was really unique.
Yeah, and then, of course, the year Cam Newton with the Heisman Trophy, as his teammate. I mean, when did you know? Okay, we've got a special talent here at quarterback that could push us to that next level.
My first, I've told the story a few times. My first wow moment with Cam actually came during summer workouts. So we were in our old indoor facility, running. We call them gassers, basically sideline to sideline, opposite sideline and back. And so you would run in two different groups. You run the skill group and the lineman group. And so the lineman group, we were all standing on one sideline while the skill group ran. And I remember we had a receiver at the time. His name was Quindarius Carr from Huntsville, and we called him Q. And Q was blazing fast. He returned punts. He was just a burner of a receiver. And so I remember standing there, and the skill group is coming back towards us, and Cam is probably 6 or 7 yards at least out in front of Quindarius, who was always the first one back. And Cam is 6 or 7 yards out in front of him, and he was looking back over his shoulder, waving his arm like come on, keep it up, pick it up, I remember a few of the linemen standing close to me. We just kind of looked at each other. Is this really happening? Because that didn't happen. Nobody burned Q like that, and very rarely did people do that. But yeah, that was kind of my first moment of like, okay, this guy's different.
Yeah, 'cause I know, and it felt like that year, with the coaches, just we're bringing him along slowly, because I still remember the Mississippi State game, 17-14 victory, but it seemed like as the year went on, and Coach Gus Malzahn got more comfortable with him, he just really just let cut Cam loose, cut the offense loose, and that was just one of the fun things I remember for that season. And I know that Arkansas game, just as a fan, I remember that game. That game was nuts. As a fan, I was sitting there watching, like, what am I watching here? With everything going, you guys going back and forth. Right. But of course, the comeback, the Alabama game, when you guys come back against them, what was that like? I mean, what do you remember at halftime? And then you guys just come out the team came out that second half and just came back and knocked off the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, so that one, obviously that I guess that's the one that everyone makes the paintings of, with the comeback title there, and it was really, it kind of like I mentioned with the national championship as a whole. You look back on it now, and it almost feels a little surreal. So I remember walking into the stadium there, and there was the whole controversy of walking to the stadium, and there's take the money and run being played, Son of a Preacher Man. And you're used to walking into stadiums and hearing songs, but it kind of hits you, and you realize like that's really being played right now, and you realize it's very pointed, and so that just kind of gives you a little extra motivation there, and just one of those things. I remember the biggest thing I remember about halftime, and I remember people ask, not so much now, but immediately after, oh man, what did Chizik say at halftime, or what was the halftime speech, or I bet he tore into you guys for being so far behind, and it really wasn't. It's really probably kind of the opposite of what you might think. It was really calm. The biggest thing that sticks out to me from that is I remember Coach Curtis Looper was the running backs coach at the time, and he said you can't score 21 at once. And it's kind of the old saying about now, how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. And it was kind of that same mentality. Look, you score 7 at a time, and then defense gets stopped, you score another 7, and before you know it, you're back in the game. And ultimately that's what happened. It came down to the wire with ended up with the Lutzy, kind of taking off from there. And that was, looking back, that immediately after that game was over, was honest to goodness probably just as fun as the post game of the national championship in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could probably have you on and do a whole episode on every game from that season.
Right. It was memorable for sure.
Yeah. But just a couple more questions for you, and I've kept you over 40 minutes here.
Oh no.
But 2011, you get started. I know it ended with an injury, the foot injury. But just over those 6 games, I mean, what was your big takeaway? Any memories? You're in the starting lineup, for the Auburn Tigers. In your senior year.
Yeah. So and in my case, everybody's situation is a little bit different, and I came in with 3 guys as true freshmen who ended up starting in the 2007 season. Ryan Pugh, Lee Zimba, and Chaz Ramsey. And, and just to be frank with you, it was a little bit, that's tough mentally. And, as an 18-year-old, you come in with these guys. We talked about redshirting earlier and, and how tough that is. And you're kind of going through those redshirt workouts and, you watch the other guys play on Saturday. And so it was really kind of tough mentally. But, you hang with it. And, I had to kind of bide my time a little bit. I was fortunate, to get in the 3 years prior, special teams and, special situations, short yardage, that kind of thing. And honestly, at that level, anytime you're able to get on the field in any capacity, you're thankful for it. And, but, it's different going from, coming on for field goals and punts or, 4th and 1 type situations to being in my case, left guard, to being the guy. And the kind of the thing I'll always remember is before our first game, we played Utah State, my senior year, that first game. And I'd always kind of hoped for the moment where they're calling out the pregame lineups and they call your name, and they call your name and, say where you're from and put your picture up there on the, on the Jumbotron. And, obviously it wasn't as big as the one they have now. So my picture wasn't as big as they may be now. But yeah, that was a special moment for me. It's kind of the culmination of all that hard work and in the last few years. And yeah, like I said, and it ended, in a not so kind way 6 weeks later, but in Fayetteville. But I was thankful, to have been blessed to start 6 games. And I can always, I can always look back on that and, and be proud of that time. And not have to wonder, maybe if you've gone to a smaller school, like I said, people are different. Personally, I believe if I'd gone to a smaller school, just growing up in Alabama, it would always kind of linger around in the back of my mind. Could you have started at in Auburn or Alabama or something like that? And so I'm thankful now to kind of have that peace of mind. And like I said, I was just blessed to be able to start as many games as I did.
Yeah, then when you got done playing, you went back to WS Neal and did a little coaching. I know we talked a little bit about that off the air, but what was that experience like, dipping your toe in the coaching world?
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it. Ultimately, it was I decided maybe to to enjoy football a little bit more from a distance. But yeah, it was it was fun. To be able to get involved with with those kids. And because a lot of times, especially in high school, you may be the, kind of the, in a lot of cases, you may be kind of the male figure, the predominant male figure in those kids' lives, in some cases. And so, it's a lot of responsibility, but you enjoy it. And, you kind of make bonds. I actually was, I still text and talk with some former players of mine. I talked with one here about a month or so ago. And yeah, so like I said, I didn't do it for long, but I did enjoy the time I was there, and was able to do it. It's really, and especially coming straight out of college, you still get a little bit amped up on game night. It's you kind of still you hear the band and you smell the grass, and kind of the sun starts to go down and you start to get a little bit keyed up, and you kind of have to tone yourself back down. Realize like I'm in a collared shirt and khakis. You're not in the pads, so you need to calm back down a little bit. But yeah, like I said, I enjoyed it, and I'm thankful, for guys who do stay in it. Coaches who really have that calling, and can be influential to young guys, and and make an impact on their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing, because I know my other show I do, I as a high school football podcast I do here down in the Dothan area, and that's a lot of what I hear coaches say. A lot of the head coaches I talk to talk about stuff like that, and that's always a great thing, and something I always enjoy hearing those stories from them guys. And and then just lastly, we're sitting here 2022, like we said, beginning of college football season has started. But what are you up to now?
Yeah, we like I said, we live in Mobile. I actually got into logistics after I got out of coaching, and it's a little bit, as odd as it sounds, it's a little bit like like working a football play to kind of make that analogy there. There are a lot of moving parts in logistics. My wife is actually she's a medical researcher at South Alabama. She's getting her PhD, so we live just across from the school, so it works out great for her. I actually work remotely. I'm fortunate enough to be able to work for a company out of Indianapolis, and they allow me to work remotely. So that's I have a pretty short commute every day. I just kind of walk upstairs and I'm in the office. So it works out pretty well as far as that goes. And so like I said, we've lived in Mobile for I guess 5 or 6 years now, and we've really grown to love it. I grew up not too far away anyway, and I never envisioned myself living here, but we've loved it. We've really grown to to kind of adopt that Gulf Coast mentality there with Mobile Bay and everything, and we love it.
Yeah, so that's awesome. That's awesome. And this has been awesome. We've got a good 50-minute conversation here, Jared. I appreciate you taking time talking about the current Auburn team, your high school career at WS Neal. Everybody. Do not know why UMS right came out of my mouth. I have the correct school in front of me, but I don't know what happened.
Hey, there are a lot of letters there. That's like it can be forgiven for sure. It's easily forgiven.
Yeah, absolutely. The person that hooked up this interview, he may give me some trouble about it, but
you will hear from James.
There you go,
for sure.
But anyways, we talked about your high school career and your Auburn time, just you as a player and everything. So I do appreciate you coming on the show, spending this time, almost an hour, talking about that stuff. And but yeah, Jared, I appreciate you doing it. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I appreciate it, man. I'll be glad to. I'll be listening to the Philip Jordan show from now. I appreciate you having me on.